Hi everyone, Jolene here from Bookworm Adventure Girl. Welcome back, and to those who are new, thanks for checking out my channel. If you are interested in diverse reading and Canadian literature, then please hit subscribe and stick around. Today I am going to be talking about the books I read in February. I did a little more reading this month than last month, which is a bit strange since February is the shortest month. I read 18 books altogether. 6 of those were for the Mondays with Margaret series, so please check that out if you are interested in ATWOOD books at all. I will leave a link to it in the description box below. Today I am going to tell you about the other 12 novels I finished. There were some that I really enjoyed and then some that were just, for me. I think I will start with the books that I finished for Canada Reads, and if you are following along, then you know that I finished all of the shortlisted books, and I did a video where I predicted the winner of Canada Reads 2021. I will link that video below as well. The Canada Reads competition begins on Monday, March 8th, and if you are interested, I invite you to join me, my friends at Canada Reads American Style, along with my friends Sarah, Larissa, and Tara on YouTube Live each evening after the debates at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll have a bit of a recap and discussion, and I will leave a link to that below as well. So for Canada Reads, I read Jonny Appleseed by Joshua Whitehead. And I don't know that enjoyed is the right word, but I think this book is an important read for Canadians. Jonny, the main character, is an indigiqueer, two-spirited man who lives off reserve and works as a cybersex worker. He's returning to the res because his stepfather has died, and we get flashbacks into Jonny's life from childhood to the present, and his struggles and where life has carried him. And what I loved about the book is that it is a voice we rarely, if ever, hear about. And I'm quite unfamiliar with the cybersex world, and I'm quite unfamiliar with the fetishes and all of those kind of things. So that's just not a world I would find myself in. And I loved Jonny's relationship with his kokum or grandmother. It was such a loving and accepting relationship, and I loved that the writing made me feel Jonny's emotions. You know, some of the feedback on this novel that I've seen has been about explicit language and sex scenes, and yes, there is language, and there are sex scenes, queer sex scenes, and I realize that that makes some people uncomfortable. So I will just say 2 things about that. One, people have a choice to read it or not. So if it's not your thing, then, that's fine. Just read something else. And then second, I think it's good to challenge ourselves to read outside of our comfort zone. I think that's how we learn and how we grow. And often we are uncomfortable about things that we just don't know about, or, something that I think was part of a lot of the comments that I saw. So I just think that people don't really know what to do with it when they are feeling that uncomfortable. And I think that that's why this book is important. Jonny is a character who may not live like I do, doesn't look like I do, dress like I do. Some of the outfits are described very well in this novel. But his life and story are just as valuable as mine, and maybe more so, because Jonny's story hasn't been told. So if you are willing to be uncomfortable and you want to learn about people, then I say give it a shot. So another Canada Reads novel I read was The Midnight Bargain by C.L. Polk, and this is probably a book I wouldn't have picked up if it weren't for the Canada Reads competition. It did grab me from the beginning because the main character, Beatrice, needs to find a book. So the story begins with a book in a bookstore. So my love for Beatrice was instantaneous. She's not looking for just any book, but she is looking for a grimoire or a book of spells. And she sees it in a store window, and when she goes to get it, there is another woman there who snags the book from her. And this book is incredibly important to Beatrice because her greatest desire is to become a magus. She is a sorcerer who practices magic in secret, and in order to become a magus, she needs to learn the spells. So Beatrice calls upon a spirit to help her, but it's going to cost her. And it is decided that the two people who want the book will need to share it and read it together. And that is how Beatrice gets involved with the brother and sister Iantha and Isbeta Levan. The fact that Beatrice wants to be a magus is a problem for a couple of reasons. One, she's a woman, and the expectation is that she will be married and have children, which is considered to be her duty. Two, her family is losing all of their money, and she is their only hope of saving their name and gaining back some of their wealth. But in order to do that, she has to enter the bargaining season for marriage. So throughout the book, Beatrice struggles with having to make this choice. Now, I said that the book grabbed me from the beginning, which is true, but my interest was not really consistent. I got a little bored of being told the same thing over and over again. I felt like I was being told, on every other page that she couldn't practice magic because she was a woman. And I get it that it was an issue, but I just think that being told, once or twice and then having it shown in various ways would have made it a little bit stronger for me. And it is really not a genre that I'm drawn to, so maybe that was the reason as well. I did like the characters, and I thought they were okay, but I wasn't, enamored with any of them, and really nothing in the plot or story was surprising for me. The last book I read for Canada Reads was Butter, Honey, Pig Bread by Francesca Ekwuyasi, and I've talked about this novel a few times already because it was longlisted for the Giller Prize last year. I am so glad that I finally read this. The novel takes place mostly in Nigeria and Canada. It is narrated by Kambirinachi and her twin daughters Kehinde and Tay. When the novel begins, we know that there's tension between these women, and they are about to be reunited after quite some time apart. From Kambirinachi, we learn of her past and how she believes she is an Ogbanje, a spirit born that kind of plagues the family by dying in childhood and being reborn. And she decides to live. She falls in love and raises her two daughters. Growing up, Kehinde and Tay are very close, as twins tend to be. Tay doesn't really speak much, but Kehinde speaks for her, and they always look out for one another, and the other is always there, until there is a very traumatic event that begins to separate them. And Kehinde and Tay both leave, Kehinde to Montreal and Tay to Halifax. And their lives are very different, but they each experience a similar things. Guilt and loneliness, rejection and love. The relationships are very authentic and deeply moving. And somehow Ekwuyasi is able to cover a lot of topics. Racism, queer love, miscarriage, rape, motherhood, faith and family dynamics. And this is just a beautifully written debut novel. Their lyrical prose kind of paint the picture of this culture, especially the food. The description of food are so incredible and drool-worthy. And they lead to memories or kind of give you more of an insight to a character. The language is like reading a melody. And I really look forward to the next novel from Francesca Ekwuyasi. So next, I think I will stick with our Canadian authors since I have a few of them to share. So next is the classic Anne of the Island by Lucy Maud Montgomery. And this is the third book in the Anne of Green Gables series. And I have to say that I loved this book. Normally in a series, it becomes boring for me or it never really lives up to the first book. But I loved this book as much as I loved the first one. In Anne of the Island, Anne goes off to college. Her college life is very different than her life at Green Gables. She's friends with Prissy Grant and a new friend, Philippa Gordon, who drove me a little bit crazy. But Anne just, accepts everyone for who they are, which is partly why I love her. She sells her first story. she's proposed to, and she has to deal with a devastating loss. And then there is also love in the air, and maybe she will finally see how madly in love Gilbert Blythe is with her. The novel is just great fun, and I love watching Anne's character grow up. The Push by Ashley Audrain is a psychological thriller about the expectations of motherhood, mental illness, and family dynamics. Blythe, who gets pregnant, has her first child, doesn't really feel a connection to her daughter Violet. And at first she kind of thinks, okay, this must just be a phase. It'll just take some time. Her husband Fox is already bonded to the child, and he kind of dismisses that there's anything out of the ordinary happening. So when their second child is born, Blythe finds that immediately she has this bond with him that she was expecting to have, and she feels this connection. And then a horrible tragedy happens, and it begins to unravel their lives. This is quite a page turner. There are a number of triggers, so you need to be aware about things like that with mental illness and abuse. And it almost feels like, their lives have kind of fallen apart, and just when things kind of find a new normal, they think, oh, like maybe we're back on track of whatever this new normal is going to be, and then something else happens. And it will definitely keep you thinking, I think, about this one. At the end, you might think, what did I just read? And the more I think about it, the more interesting I find it to be. There is, if you have read this, I would love to know, because there is a burning question that I have about the ending. So if you're looking for a page turner, something quick, something that makes you think a little bit, then this, I would recommend this one. The next book was one of my most anticipated reads of 2021. Gutter Child by Jael Richardson is a dystopian or speculative fiction novel. Elamina is 14 when the book begins, and she is a gutter child and a special project because she has grown up on the mainland with her mother. Her mother dies, and Elamina is sent to an academy where her world is turned upside down because she doesn't really feel that she belongs there, and she's never felt like a gutter child. So she has grown up in a world divided between the gutter people and the mainlanders. And the gutter people have to work for mainlanders to pay off extraordinary debts. It's insane. This story touches upon so many important topics. Class, a society that has a system that benefits some over others, oppression, difficult decisions that have to be made, and then the consequences that come from those decisions. It's also a story of survival, resiliency, and perseverance. This is an imaginary world, but it has so many parallels to our own world that it's a bit disturbing. The last Canadian author I read this month was David Bergen. I read his collection of short stories and a novella called Hear the Dark. In fact, I started this book months ago, and then I got sidetracked by about a gazillion other books. So I finally got around to getting back to reading it, and I didn't love any of the short stories. I liked some of them more than others. I did really like the novella. There is definitely a mood to the stories. Some of them are a bit dark, and they are mostly about men, if not all of them, if I remember correctly. The novella is about a young woman who is trying to find her own voice and live by her own values. And I think that this was better written than the short stories, and it could even maybe be, if it was fleshed out a little bit, it could be a good novel. So throughout the stories and the novella, there are themes of faith and religion, sex, gender, violence, and this desire to escape. Next is The Book Charmer by American author Karen Hawkins. This is an enchanting debut novel, and it's the first novel in the Dove Pond series. The Book Charmer is just a sweet story that takes place in the quaint town of Dove Pond. Sarah Dove and her sisters all have special gifts unique to them. Sarah is the librarian, and books talk to her. like literally talk to her. So Sarah makes sure that the people in town get the books that they need that will help them in their lives. And the people in town have accepted this, and they know that if Sarah asks you to deliver a book to someone or tells you to read a book, that you must listen. And this becomes especially important when Grace, Daisy, and Mama G move to town, and we learn their story and what has brought them to Dove Pond. So this book has many lovable characters, there's a bit of magic, and there's just tons of charm. So if you like feel-good stories, if you enjoy books about books and book lovers, then this book is for you. It's a light, easy read, and it was a nice change from some of my other books that I've been reading. The next book is also by an American author. Talking Animals by Joni Murphy was sent to me for review by ZG Stories and Book Hug Press. And I loved the concept of this book. It uses animals to tell a human story. Alfonso is an alpaca, his buddy Mitchell is a llama. They work in New York City at City Hall, and they uncover a political scandal. So we meet all kinds of characters. There's goats, hawks, dogs, cats, lemurs, horses, sea creatures. You get the idea. So I loved the themes. There are themes of illness, grief, trying to better oneself, mental illness, suicide, systemic dysfunctions, mistreatment of some over others, and our connections to nature. So there were a few funny lines and puns that were entertaining, but for me, the story and the telling of the story was just not great. I got a little bored by it. However, if you like social commentary, politics, and anthropomorphism, then this book might be for you. Calypso by David Sedaris is another American author, was my book club's February read, and this was the first time I've read a novel by Sedaris, who is a comedian. The book was written like little short stories, and all of the stories are about his family, and I did laugh out loud several times. Some of the stories are heartbreaking, and some are very entertaining. I loved how Sedaris managed to have some pretty heavy themes like alcoholism, suicide, facing our own mortality, strained family relationships. And he put those alongside themes and stories about shopping and traveling and conversations with strangers, and the funny predicaments that we find ourselves in. So one of the things that came up in our book club discussion was that his humor, probably is not for everyone, and some of the women felt that his humor is more appealing to men. So that might be true, but I really liked this book, and I do hope to read some of his earlier work because I've heard, a lot of really positive things about several of his earlier novels. Your Story, My Story is by Dutch novelist Connie Palmen and translated by Eileen J. Stevens and Anna Asbury. This is a historical fiction novel based on the true love story of literary icons Sylvia Plath and Ted Hughes. And I received this book from Over the River PR and Amazon Crossing. So I was very excited to read it. The story is told from Ted Hughes' perspective, looking back on his 7-year marriage to his bride, Sylvia, before she took her own life. And I thought it was a clever way to approach the novel, and it's an interesting reflection on their marriage, on mental illness, on artistic passions, and hindsight. Hughes would have had the most unique perspective, looking back at events and seeing things differently. So it has inspired me to read some of Hughes' writing, as I've really only read a few of Sylvia Plath's books in the past. So I thought that this was an enjoyable and creative read, especially if you are a fan of Plath or Hughes. And it's a quick book as well. The final book on my wrap-up list is Winter by Scottish author Ali Smith. This is the second book in Ali Smith's seasonal quartet. And if you've been following my channel, then you may already know that her first novel, Autumn, her first novel in this series, Autumn, was in my top 20 books of 2020. And I loved Winter too. It begins by introducing us to the character of Sophia, who is in her 60s. and she's seeing and hearing things. One of those things she sees is a disembodied head that she talks to. And Sophia is preparing for company for Christmas, her son Art and his girlfriend Charlotte. Art is a blog writer. He is working on a post about the winter solstice, and things have not gone well with Charlotte. So he hires a woman to play Charlotte for the weekend. Fake Charlotte is one of my favorite characters. When Art and fake Charlotte arrive, Sophia is acting very strange, and fake Charlotte gets Art to call his Aunt Iris, even though Iris and Sophia haven't seen each other in decades. So we continue to get flashbacks to the early 1980s to learn more about Sophia, Iris, and Art's father. And Art believes he has only seen his father a couple of times, and he shares these stories about his father with fake Charlotte. The book is written in beautiful prose. I loved the wintry descriptions. I loved the characters and how the story, continued its connections to Dickens, which started with autumn. It also continued a number of the same themes. So the themes of nature, death, war, art, books, music, love, and a passion for words and language. And if you've read Autumn, then I highly recommend continuing and reading Winter. Some people say that you don't have to read this quartet in order, but I suggest that you do. Autumn just sets the tone, and I believe that there is a connection to Winter with characters. It's not overt, it's not obvious. There is only, one or two little clues, but I think in the end, the reading experience will be better if you do read them in order. Also, everyone I know who has read all four have said that they would, read them in order. So that's just the heads up. And I'm really looking forward to reading Spring. And as you know, I am reading the novels in their season. So I will be able to start that one in a few weeks. So those are the 12 books of my February reads. I will list all of the books and authors I mentioned in the description box below. I will also include the links for Canada Reads for next week and the links to our live YouTube recaps afterwards, after the show. So it would be great to have you join us. Let me know if you have any questions about that. And let me know if you have read any of the books on this list, or if they are on your TBR pile. What books did you read in February? Is there anything that you think I should be checking out? Books that you thought were fantastic? Or maybe books that you didn't like? I look forward to chatting with you in the comments. Thanks again for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day, and don't forget to make every day an adventure.